As you may have noticed from the sermon title, I'm going to talk about adoption. Adopt. What came to your mind just now as I said that word? Adopt. Because most of us know it, right? We know what it means. It can mean to legally take another person's child and raise it as one's own. You know, we adopted little Joey when he was just 3 years old, and we brought him up as one of our own, right? Or it can also mean to take up or to start to use or follow an idea or a method or a cause of action. This approach has been adopted by many of the bigger banks, okay? Or it can also mean taking on or assuming an attitude or a position. Then he adopted a patronizing tone. Okay? Adopt. Basically, to adopt is to make a deliberate choice to claim something or someone as your own. And you make that choice to claim this person or this idea or this notion as your own because you value it or that person, okay? You adopt what you value. Okay? We've had our little vocabulary lesson for the morning. But what does that mean? What does that mean, really, for you and I here today on this July morning? What good is a vocabulary lesson to us when we live in a world that's just rife with conflicts and violence and what appears to be just a flagrant disregard for the sanctity of human life? It's going on all around us. I don't know about you, but I've come to the point that I turn on the news expecting to hear what's gone wrong now. You know, the negative news seems to just outweigh the good news by this appalling margin. It's just awful. Sadly, news of shootings and all sorts of violence have just become commonplace. It's part of how we live. Drug abuse and deaths from overdoses are on the rise, not just in the big cities, but right here in North Dakota. We live in a frightening place. You know, we hear disturbing reports about, Korea's nuclear and missile building programs. I just had an article on the news last night about how Hawaii is thinking this over because now they're within range of North Korea. We hear of new insect-borne diseases, that the mosquitoes are carrying and whatnot, or ticks and antibiotic-resistant strains of superbugs that are out there now and plaguing us. The world around us can be a confusing and frightening place. Not bringing up anything new. And I know that's kind of depressing. And if we left things right there with just that bad news, yeah, it would be depressing. But fortunately for us, we have good news to consider today. We do. We really do. This summer season, it's ordinary time. And that's when the lectionary really tries to get us exposed to as many of the books of the Bible as they can without trying to limit things to a coherent theme. Like we have during Lent and Advent, there will be a theme for each Sunday. Ordinary time, they don't strive to do that. But sometimes you can kind of see kind of a theme running through it if you look at it. And today is one of those days because it's a wonderful theme if you think about it. It's a theme that lifts up God's deliberate choice to interact with and provide for humankind, you and me. Okay? You see that in all of the lessons. So we'll look at them just a little bit. We talk about our world being frightening. Today we encounter in our Old Testament lesson Jacob at a very frightening time in his life. Jacob is out on the road, all on his lonesome. Ostensibly, he's been sent to go get a wife, but in reality, he has been sent away from home to get away from his older brother who aims to cancel his ticket permanent just as soon as he can, because through Esau's foolishness, first he sold his birthright for a bowl of lentil soup, but then when his ailing father is about to give the family blessing to the oldest child, Jacob lies his way in there and tricks his father into giving him the oldest child child's blessing. The only thing left that Esau had coming to him, Jacob steals that. Esau understandably is upset. So Jacob flees for his life. So he's left everything that he knows. He's out on the road all by himself. And he comes to this spot and he lays down. Okay? Tired from traveling from the day and probably all the stress he's under. He lays down and out there in the middle of nowhere, Jacob encounters God in a dream. Now, to fully appreciate this, we need to understand how dreams were viewed in those days as compared to now, because nowadays modern day science tends to see dreams as our subconscious working out things, okay? But in those days, dreams like the one that Jacob had were essentially messages from God. God spoke to people in their dreams. And to tell you the truth, I'm confident that God still does that he still will speak to us in our dreams today. So God is speaking to Jacob in a dream, and in a dream, God speaks to a decidedly imperfect Jacob, right? This guy is willing to lie and steal to get what he wants. And God speaks to him, and he tells Jacob, imperfect Jacob, and us, as imperfect as we might happen to be, some important truths. In this dream, Jacob sees this stairway, excuse me. And on this stairway that leads from earth up into heavens, it's got messengers going up and down, back and forth they're going the whole time. And in this vision, we're being told of something important. This just isn't some weird kind of thing to see in a dream, but it's actually pointing to a connection, a constant connection, right? That's what the messengers are. They're carrying messages from the people to heaven, from heaven to the people. Heaven is where God is, so it's a constant connection between God and the people, okay? Constantly connected. God has not abandoned us here on this earth. Even when stuff is happening that we don't like or that frightens us, God doesn't abandon us. But that's not all. God himself comes to Jacob and he stands by him. And again, this is information. It tells us that God isn't some distant, ineffectual, ambivalent, uncaring God, but rather God is an ever-present part of our lives. And he comes to Jacob and he tells Jacob, and he tells us again today something important. He says, I am with you now. And I will protect you everywhere you go. And I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done everything that I have promised you. Okay? We're shown in Jacob's dream that God does care about humankind, that God will accomplish, this is the important part, not only does God care about us, but that God will accomplish all that God has set out to do. Not because of what we have done, but because of who God is. God values us. So he's going to accomplish everything that he set out to do for us. And then in Matthew's gospel, we visit this parable of the weeds and the wheat, or the wheat and the tares, as you see it in some other translations. And again, we're told some important stuff. And yes, there's an acknowledgement that there's evil in this world, but we already knew that, right? Unless you're living under a rock somewhere the whole time, you're pretty much aware that evil is going on. And we're also given a warning that those who refuse to follow God and pay attention to God are not going to prosper. However, God will take care of those who follow him, those who believe in him, right? He's going to gather the wheat into his barn. And then the righteous will shine like the sun in their Father's kingdom, right? To shine is to prosper, to be perfect, to be unblemished. That's going to happen to those who follow God, who believe in him. Again, not because of what we have done, but because of what God will do for and with us. And then we encounter Paul's letter to the Romans. And again, Paul's upfront about this. He acknowledges that suffering exists, right? We don't like suffering. It's there. It exists. But he tells us something important. And I love this verse. Paul says, I believe that the present suffering is nothing compared to the coming glory that is to be revealed in us. Notice that there's no doubt in Paul's mind. Paul knows something great is coming our way. And he makes this assertion confidently because of how he feels. He said, all who are led by God's spirits are God's sons and daughters. You didn't receive a spirit of slavery to lead you back again into fear, but you received a spirit that shows you are adopted as his children. Okay? Remember the word that I used to start this message. Adopt. Remember what that means. To legally take another person's child and raise it as one's own. All of us, as imperfect and as fault-ridden as we may be, but when we come to God, without exception, we are lovingly, deliberately chosen by God, who adopts us and claims us as his own to be cared for as he sees fit. God does not have to do this. Nobody's twisting God's arm to say, well, you got to adopt that one over there too. No, God adopts us, each of us, all of us, the ones who get everything right and the ones who can't get their act together. God adopts all of us because he loves us. We are adopted, you and I. Let there be no doubt in your mind. You have been adopted by God. Every single one of you. God deliberately chose you. And you are considered by God to be one of his beloved children. And because God loves you, that promise that he made to Jacob all of those years ago is also made to you. God is speaking to us through Scripture again today. And he tells us, I will not leave you until I have done everything that I have promised you. Okay? And God promises us, as Jesus put so well in today's gospel lesson, that all who believe in him, all of his adopted children, are going to shine like the sun in their Father's kingdom. Shine like the sun. Remember that last verse, Amazing Grace? When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, okay? To be in perfect condition, flawless. We're going to shine like the sun in our Father's kingdom, a glorious, bright, shining life that will never, ever end. It's forever. It's kind of a difficult concept for us to grasp. We like to measure stuff, say it starts here and it ends here. Forever doesn't stop. Forever just keeps going. And forever is a very, 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 very long time when you compare it to the few decades that we are going to spend in our troubled earthly lives. Think about that for a moment and then remember this. Even though we live in an imperfect world, even though we live where suffering does exist, even though we may suffer ourselves, you and I have been deliberately adopted by God, and because of what God has already done for us, the present suffering is nothing compared to the coming glory that is going to be revealed to us. Because we've been adopted, you and I. And that's a really good thing. Praise be to God, who claims each of us as his own. Amen.